Now, even those people who can't afford electricity need never be cut off from news or emergency alerts, thanks to a radio that runs on muscle power, not plugs, not batteries. All because of a British engineer with a heart who never threw anything away. One afternoon in 1991, Trevor Bayliss turned on the telly and found himself watching a documentary about the spread of AIDS in Africa.
They said the only way they could stop this dreadful disease cutting its way through Africa and many other places was with the power of radio or communication. Most of Africa didn't have electricity, and the only other form of electricity was in the form of batteries, which were horrendously expensive.
Like many people, Trevor wanted to help, but unlike most, he could possibly do something about it. There wasn't much this man couldn't do. He had been a national champion swimmer, an acrobat, and even a stuntman. But he was also an engineer who had designed a whole range of special devices for people with disabilities.
I don't invent things simply only because of the money, you know. It's very often about the need, and need is the thing that tends to push me.
Trevor wanted to give the people of Africa a way of getting the information they needed. He began to picture a radio he could build for them that would not cost a penny to run.
I'm thinking of my old gramophone with a handle on it, and I'm thinking to myself, look, if you can get all that noise by dragging a rusty nail around a piece of old Bakelite using a spring, surely there's enough power in that spring to drive a radio. Voila.
He had the perfect place to build a prototype, his workshop, full of recycled junk.
I don't discard anything. I know it sounds daft, but if there's room for it, I'll keep it, you know. But it's part of my persona, I guess.
Trevor began with an old transistor radio that was in his workshop. Next, he needed to find a power source. Batteries weren't allowed, but a dynamo might do. A dynamo is an electric motor run in reverse. If the mechanism inside is turned, electricity comes out of it. The best example is headlights on a bicycle. Pedaling the bike produces the power for the lights. Trevor soon had the dynamo connected to the transistor radio. He then used a hand drill to turn the dynamo, a temporary measure until he could design a crank to turn it. What he heard from his inventions was music to his ears.
By the time I found the solder and all the other bits and bobs, the wires, and actually did the work, half-hour top whack is what it took me to prove that my idea was a reality.
Finally, all Trevor needed was a spring, one that would store the power once he had cranked the radio. The same sort of power a watch has after it's been wound. He had lots of springs, but he needed a constant fourth spring so his radio would run smoothly. Trevor was stumped, but not for long.
Just by chance, when I was climbing in the car, I put my seatbelt on. I thought, hang on, constant force. So I went to the breaker's yard and managed to get a constant force spring from them. Boom, boom.
The seatbelt spring meant Trevor had completed his prototype wind-up radio. Crank it for 30 seconds, and it played for 14 minutes. He just had to get the radio into production, which was, of course, the toughest part. For 3 years, Trevor had nothing but rejections from potential investors.
By this time I got the patent in hand, I went to everybody you could think of, right? And they all said no.
Many inventors would have given up at this point, but the former daredevil showman had a bold idea. Phone the BBC and tell them how his wind-up radio could be a breakthrough invention for Africa. And the BBC bit.
Ironically, I went to the BBC World Service and they loved it. And then they passed me on to the BBC Tomorrow's World team. And of course, they did a number and woof, it really did go like clockwork in the sense that everybody went wild for it.
So you think there really is a market?
I think there's a tremendous market if it's marketed at an affordable price.
Two investors saw the show and leapt at the chance to invest. Together with them, Trevor set up a company in Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, it's like live, mate. Oh, it's terrific.
Soon, his radios were rolling off the factory production line. Finally, Trevor received the recognition he deserved. He was honoured with an Order of the British Empire and a big thank you from his hero, Nelson Mandela. But his greatest pleasure was seeing his invention being used where it was needed.
When you see people out there dancing and leaping around because this is the first radio they've been able to have, and the fact that they didn't need a power line coming in from Ethiopia in order to run the thing, I mean, you know, it's a great honour, great privilege.
Thanks to inventor Trevor Bayliss, millions of people around the world are better informed.